In the fog-choked alleys of Victorian London, where gaslights flicker and secrets lurk in every shadow, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson are drawn into a chilling mystery. A humble sailmaker is found dead, his workshop smeared with blood and a peculiar canvas bearing cryptic stitches. What begins as a simple murder spirals into a web of smuggling, betrayal, and hidden identities tied to the murky waters of the Thames. With Holmes's razor-sharp deductions and Watson's steadfast loyalty, they unravel a case where the smallest clue, a thread in a sail, reveals a conspiracy that threatens to unravel the very fabric of London's maritime trade. Packed with witty dialogue, vivid atmosphere, and a jaw-dropping twist, this tale promises a 10/10 Sherlockian adventure. Chapter 1. The Fog-Shrouded Summons. The autumn of 1888 cloaked London in a fog so thick it seemed the city had been submerged in a sea of grey. Gaslights fought vainly against the miasma, their glow reduced to faint halos that flickered like the last breaths of drowning men. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire in our lodgings at 221B Baker Street, attempting to distract myself with a medical journal. The damp chill seeped through the windows, and I found my thoughts drifting to warmer days until a sharp rap at the door shattered my reverie. Sherlock Holmes, lounging in his armchair with a pipe in hand, glanced up from his contemplation of the ceiling. "Mrs. Hudson is not expecting callers at this hour," he remarked, his voice laced with that familiar spark of anticipation. "This Watson promises to be interesting." Before I could respond, our landlady ushered in a woman whose appearance was as striking as the urgency in her eyes. She was young, perhaps no more than 30, with dark hair pinned beneath a modest bonnet and a shawl drawn tightly against the cold. Her face, pale as porcelain, bore the marks of recent tears, yet there was a resolute set to her jaw that suggested defiance against despair. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she began, her voice trembling but clear, "I am Mrs. Eliza Carver. My husband, Thomas, was found dead this morning in his sailmaker's workshop near the Thames. The police say it was a robbery gone wrong, but I know better. He was murdered, sir, and I beg you to find the truth." Holmes' eyes gleamed with that predatory focus I had come to recognize. He gestured for her to sit, his long fingers steepled before him. "Pray, Mrs. Carver, begin at the beginning. Omit no detail, however trivial it may seem." She took a shuddering breath, clutching a handkerchief as if it were an anchor. Thomas was a sailmaker, one of the best in Wapping. His canvases were sought by ship captains from here to the Indies. He was a quiet man, devoted to his craft, but lately he was troubled. He wouldn't speak of it, not even to me, but I saw the change. He'd stay late at the workshop, muttering about debts and promises. Last night, he didn't come home. I thought he'd fallen asleep at his bench again, as he often did, but this morning, his apprentice, young Daniel, found him, stabbed, lying in a pool of blood. I felt a pang of sympathy, but Holmes' expression remained impassive, his mind already sifting through her words. "The police mentioned robbery," he said. "What was taken?" "Nothing. As far as I know," Mrs. Carver replied, her brow furrowing. "His tools, his purse, even the silver watch he always carried, they were all there, but the workshop was in disarray, as if someone had been searching for something. And there was a canvas." Holmes leaned forward slightly, a hound catching the scent. "A canvas?" "Yes," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It was one of Thomas's sails, half finished, but it had strange markings, stitches in a pattern I'd never seen. Daniel said it wasn't for any ship they were working on. The police dismissed it, but I know my husband. He was trying to tell us something. Did you bring this canvas? Holmes asked sharply. She shook her head, eyes downcast. The police took it as evidence. Inspector Lestrade said it was irrelevant, but I don't trust their judgment. Thomas was no fool. If he left that canvas, it means something. Holmes' lips curled into a faint smile, the kind that signalled his disdain for the yard-sit's plodding methods. And your husband disassociates. Any enemies? Rivals in trade? Mrs. Carver hesitated, her fingers twisting the handkerchief. He worked with many at the docks, captains, merchants, chandlers. He never spoke of enemies, but there was a man, a Captain Hargrove, who came by often. Thomas seemed uneasy around him, and his apprentices, Daniel and another lad, Peter. They were loyal, I think, but young men can be reckless. Holmes rose abruptly, his lean frame casting a shadow across the room. Mrs. Carver, you have done well to come to me. Watson, fetch your coat. We shall visit this workshop at once. The fog may obscure the eyes of Scotland Yard, but it shall not hinder us. As we prepared to depart, Mrs. Carver clasped my arm, her eyes pleading. Dr. Watson, please. Thomas was a good man. He didn't deserve this. Find who did it, for his sake. I nodded, moved by her grief, though Holmes was already halfway down the stairs, his mind no doubt racing ahead to the puzzle at hand. The fog outside swallowed us as we stepped into Baker Street, the clatter of our hansom cab muffled by the oppressive air. I could sense the weight of the case settling upon us, a murder, a cryptic canvas, and secrets lurking beneath the surface of London's bustling docks. As we rode toward Wapping, Holmes was silent, his sharp profile etched against the dim glow of the cab's lantern. I knew that look. The game was afoot, and no detail, however small, would escape his notice. What did you think of the mysterious canvas clue in Chapter 1? Where are you listening this thrilling Sherlock Holmes adventure from London, New York, or perhaps a cozy corner somewhere else? Drop your location in the comments below and let us know what you suspect about Thomas Carver's murder. Don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe to the channel to follow Holmes and Watson as they unravel this chilling case. Stay tuned for more deductions and surprises. Chapter 2. The Grieving Widow's Tale. The hansom cab rattled through the fog-draped streets of Wapping, the air thick with the briny tang of the Thames and the acrid bite of coal smoke. Sherlock Holmes sat beside me, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the cab's window, his mind no doubt dissecting Mrs. Carver's words with surgical precision. I, Dr. John Watson, was still mulling over the widow's account, the sailmaker's untimely death, the cryptic canvas, and the shadow of unease that clung to her mention of Captain Hargrove. The cab lurched to a stop near a narrow street, lined with weathered warehouses, their silhouettes looming like spectres in the mist. Holmes sprang out, his long coat swirling as he surveyed the scene. "Come, Watson," he called, already striding toward a modest building with a sign reading Carver's Sails and Rigging. The door hung ajar, guarded by a lone constable who nodded curtly as Holmes flashed his card. Inside, the workshop was a cavern of shadows, lit only by a flickering lantern and the faint glow filtering through grimy windows. The air was heavy with the scent of hemp tar and something sharper, blood. Mrs. Carver followed us inside, her steps hesitant as if the very floorboards held memories of her husband's fate. "This is where it happened," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She pointed to a workbench in the corner, its surface stained dark with dried blood. Tools, awls, needles and spools of heavy thread were scattered haphazardly, as if caught in a storm. A large canvas frame stood nearby, empty, its wooden supports gleaming under the lantern's light. Holmes' gaze swept the room, his movements swift yet deliberate, like a hawk circling its prey. He knelt by the workbench, his long fingers tracing the bloodstains. "The police have trampled the scene, as expected," he muttered, his tone laced with disdain, "but not hopelessly so. Watson, observe the blood pattern, irregular, with splatters extending outward. This was no single thrust. The assailant struck multiple times, with force and panic." I nodded, my medical training affirming his observation. The wounds must have been deep, likely to the chest or abdomen. A frenzied attack, then. "Frenzied, but not unplanned," Holmes replied, his eyes narrowing as he examined a splintered chair nearby. "The disarray suggests a struggle, yet the absence of theft is telling. A robbery would have left the purse emptied, the watch taken. No, Watson, this was personal or purposeful." Mrs. Carver wrung her hands, her eyes darting between us. "Thomas was strong, Mr. Holmes. He sit have fought back, but who would do this? He was no saint, but he was fair, kind to his workers, honest in his trade." Holmes rose, brushing dust from his knees. "Mrs. Carver, tell me more of your husband Seat's recent behavior. You mentioned debts and promises. Was he in financial distress? Had he enemies among his clients?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Thomas never spoke openly of money troubles, but I sensed them. We live modestly, yet he'd come home with less coin than before. He'd say the trade was slow, but his workshop was never idle. As for enemies, there was Captain Hargrove. Thomas supplied sails for his ship, the Erindor, but their meetings grew tense. Once I overheard Thomas say something about no more favors. Hargrove left in a temper." Stet's lips twitched, a faint sign of satisfaction. "And the apprentices, Daniel and Peter. Their characters. Daniel's a good lad, barely 18, eager to learn," she said. "He worshipped Thomas, followed him like a pup. Peter, he's older, perhaps 22, quieter. He came to us a year ago, recommended by a chandler. He's skilled, but keeps to himself. I never saw them quarrel with Thomas, but young men have their secrets." Holmes moved to the empty canvas frame, his fingers brushing the wood. "Any canvas with the strange stitches. Describe it, if you please." "It was coarse sailcloth, half sewn," Mrs. Carver said, her brow furrowing. "The stitches were uneven, not like Thomas's usual work. They formed shapes, almost like letters or symbols, in red thread. I couldn't make sense of them, but they weren't random. Thomas was meticulous. He'd never waste thread on nonsense." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And where is this canvas now?" "With Inspector Lestrade," she replied. "He took it to Scotland Yard, though he called it Cyprus. I begged him to keep it safe." Holmes snorted softly. "Lestrade's talent for dismissing the essential is unmatched. Watson, we must see this canvas at once. But first," he turned to Mrs. Carver, his tone softening slightly. "Your husband Set's ledger. Where did he keep it?" She pointed to a small desk in the corner, its drawers ajar. "There, but the police looked through it. They said it was just orders and accounts." Holmes crossed to the desk, rifling through papers with practiced efficiency. He pulled out a worn leather ledger, its pages filled with neat columns of figures and names. His eyes scanned the entries, pausing occasionally. Interesting, he murmured. Frequent orders for the errand door, yet payments are inconsistent. And here a note in the margin. CH demands more, but no further. CH Captain Hargrove, presumably. I peered over his shoulder. Sounds like Hargrove was pressuring him. Blackmail, perhaps. Perhaps, Holmes said, closing the ledger with a snap, or something more intricate. Mrs. Carver, did your husband ever mention a specific cargo or unusual shipments tied to the errand door? She shook her head, her eyes welling with tears. He kept such matters from me. He said the less I knew, the safer I stood be. Holmes's expression hardened. A prudent man. Your husband, Watson. We shall visit Scotland Yard to examine this canvas, then pay a call on Captain Hargrove. Mrs. Carver, remain here with the constable. Do not disturb the workshop further. As we stepped back into the fog, I felt the weight of the mystery deepen. The sailmaker's death was no simple crime, and the cryptic canvas hinted at secrets far beyond a mere murder. Holmes' silence as we hailed another cab told me he was already piecing together the threads of this enigma, and I braced myself for the twists that lay ahead. Chapter 3. The Blood-Stained Workshop. The fog clung to Wapping like a shroud as Sherlock Holmes, and I returned to Thomas Carver's sailmaker's workshop, the chill of the Thames seeping into my bones. The constable at the door, a stout fellow with a weary expression, gave us a curt nod, clearly resigned to Holmes's unorthodox methods. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the mingled scents of tar, hemp, and the metallic tang of blood. The workshop, though modest, bore the marks of a craftsman's pride, shelves lined with neatly coiled ropes, tools hung in precise rows, and bolts of canvas stacked against the walls. Yet the scene was marred by chaos, a toppled chair, scattered tools, and the grim stain of blood on the workbench where Thomas Carver had met his end. Holmes moved with the grace of a predator, his eyes darting from one detail to another. "Watson," he said, his voice low but sharp, "observe the floor. The dust here is disturbed, but not uniformly. Footprints, two distinct sets, one heavy, one lighter. The heavier tread belongs to Carver, judging by the size and wear. The other, smaller, nimble, perhaps an apprentice, or an intruder." I knelt beside him, squinting at the faint impressions in the dust. Could it be one of the apprentices, Daniel or Peter? I asked, recalling Mrs. Carver's descriptions. "Possibly," Holmes replied, his fingers brushing the floor. "But note the heel mark, shallow, suggesting a quick step, someone cautious or hurried. A man fleeing a crime, perhaps, or one searching in haste." He rose, his gaze shifting to the workbench. The bloodstain was stark, a dark pool with jagged splatters radiating outward, confirming the ferocity of the attack. Holmes leaned closer, his magnifying glass glinting in the lantern light. "The blood is dry, but not uniformly so. The edges are crusted, yet the center retains a faint sheen. Carver died no more than 12 hours ago. Likely near midnight." I nodded, my medical instincts aligning with his estimate. "Multiple stab wounds, you said earlier. The attacker was determined, but not professional. A professional would have been cleaner, more precise." "Precisely, Watson," Holmes said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "This was passion or desperation, not calculation. Yet the absence of theft suggests a purpose beyond mere gain. We must consider what the killer sought." He turned to the empty canvas frame, its wooden supports bare save for a few stray threads. Mrs. Carver spoke of a canvas with strange stitches. "Its absence is telling. Either the police have it as she claims, or someone else removed it before their arrival. Holmes moved to the shelves, his fingers trailing over the tools, an awl, a heavy needle, a pair of shears. He paused at a small wooden box, its lid slightly ajar. Inside were spools of thread, one of which was a vivid red, unlike the coarse white and grey threads typical of sailmaking. "Curious," he murmured, holding the spool to the light. "This thread is finer, almost silken, not practical for sails, but ideal for intricate work. Perhaps the stitches Mrs. Carver described." I frowned, trying to follow his reasoning. "You think Carver used this thread for his cryptic message? But why? If he was in danger, why not write a note or tell his wife directly?" Holmes's eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of discovery. "Because, Watson, a note could be destroyed or overlooked. A canvas, part of his trade, would seem innocuous to an outsider yet significant to someone who knew to look. Carver was clever. He hid his message in plain sight. He pocketed the spool. His movements swift. We must see this canvas at Scotland Yard. But first, let us examine the rest of this workshop." He crossed to a corner, where a heavy iron safe stood, its door scratched but unopened. Holmes knelt, inspecting the lock. No signs of tampering, yet the scratches are fresh. Someone tried to force it, likely with a tool from this very room. He gestured to the scattered shears nearby. The killer was interrupted, perhaps by the arrival of the apprentice Daniel. I glanced around, picturing the scene. So Carver is working late alone. Someone enters, someone he knows, perhaps given the lack of forced entry. They argue, it turns violent, and Carver is stabbed. The killer searches for something, maybe the canvas or something in the safe, but flees before finishing. Holmes nodded, though his expression suggested he was already several steps ahead. "A plausible sequence, Watson, but incomplete. The canvas is key. Its removal, whether by the killer or the police, suggests it holds a clue the murderer did not want found or did not recognize." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room once more. "There is another detail here, something overlooked. Look at the workbench again." I followed his instruction, studying the blood-stained surface. Amid the chaos, I noticed a small, crumpled piece of paper tucked beneath a spool of thread. I retrieved it carefully, unfolding it to reveal a hasty sketch, a crude map of the Thames docks, with a single pier marked by a cross. "Holmes, look at this. A map, perhaps of a meeting place." He took the paper, his eyes narrowing as he studied it. "Not a meeting place, Watson, but a destination. This pier is in Shadwell, a hub for smaller vessels. The Erindor, Captain Hargrove's ship, is likely docked there. This sketch, combined with the ledger's note about CH demanding more, points to a connection we cannot ignore." Holmes folded the map and slipped it into his pocket alongside the spool of thread. "The workshop has told us much, but the canvas will tell us more. We must confront Lestrade and secure it before it is mishandled further. And then, Watson, we shall pay a visit to the docks. The Thames holds secrets, and I intend to drag them into the light." As we left the workshop, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping the world in a veil of mystery. I felt the weight of the case pressing upon me, each clue a thread in a tapestry. Holmes was already weaving. The sailmaker's death was no random act, and I sensed that the truth when revealed would be as tangled and treacherous as the river itself. Chapter 4. The enigmatic canvas clue. The hansom cab clattered through the fog-soaked streets of London, carrying Sherlock Holmes and me from the grim scene of Carver's workshop to the austere halls of Scotland Yard. The air inside the cab was heavy with the damp chill of the Thames, and I found myself shivering, not merely from the cold, but from the growing sense that this case was far deeper than a simple murder. Holmes sat beside me, his sharp features illuminated intermittently by the flicker of passing gaslights, his fingers drumming lightly on the folded map we had found. His silence was not one of idleness. I knew his mind was racing, piecing together the fragments of evidence with the precision of a watchmaker. Scotland Yard was a hive of activity despite the late hour, with constables bustling through the corridors and the faint clatter of typewriters echoing from distant offices. Inspector Lestrade greeted us with his usual mix of wariness and resignation, his ferret-like face twitching as Holmes strode into his cramped office without preamble. "Holmes, Watson," Lestrade said, leaning back in his chair. "I might have known you'd poke your nose into this whopping business. A straightforward case. If you ask me, robbery gone wrong, poor sod got stabbed. We've got the murder weapon, a sailmaker's knife, and we're questioning the apprentices." Holmes' lips curled into a thin smile, one that conveyed his utter contempt for Lestrade's conclusions. "Straightforward, you say? Then pray enlighten me, Inspector. Where is the canvas Mrs. Carver described, the one with the peculiar stitches?" Lestrade's brow furrowed, and he gestured to a cluttered table in the corner. "That thing. It's over there, but it's just sailcloth with some nonsense scribbles. Hardly evidence. The killer was after money, not sewing projects." Holmes crossed to the table with the grace of a panther, his eyes locking onto a folded piece of sailcloth, coarse and stained, its edges frayed. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a series of irregular stitches in vivid red thread, forming what appeared to be a pattern of symbols or letters. I leaned closer, squinting in the dim light. The stitches were uneven, as Mrs. Carver had said, but deliberate crude shapes that might have been letters, numbers, or something else entirely. To my untrained eye, they seemed random, yet Holmes's expression suggested otherwise. "Watson, observe," he said, his voice low and intense. "These are not mere decorations. The thread is the same silken red we found in the workshop, and the pattern it's Cipher, or perhaps a map. The stitches vary in length and angle, suggesting a code embedded within the fabric itself." I frowned, trying to make sense of it. A code? But why would Carver go to such lengths? If he had a message to leave, why not write it plainly? Holmes's eyes gleamed with that fierce light of discovery. "Because, my dear Watson, a plain message could be destroyed or dismissed. A sailmaker's canvas marked in his trade would seem innocuous to the ignorant, yet unmistakable to those who know its significance." Carver was no fool. He knew his life was in danger and left this for someone to find. Lestrade snorted, crossing his arms. "A code, Holmes. You sit seeing mysteries where there sits only a dead man sits doodles," the apprentices said. "Carver was working late, probably tired, and made a mess of his stitches. Happens all the time." Holmes ignored him, his fingers tracing the stitches with surgical precision. "The pattern repeats in sections," he murmured, almost to himself. 3 groups of stitches, each with a distinct rhythm. The first group, short, long, short, could represent letters or coordinates. The second group has a diagonal slant, suggesting directionality. And the third, curious, a single stitch, doubled back, as if to mark an end or a focal point. I watched, fascinated, as Holmes' mind unraveled the canvas's secrets. Could it be nautical? I ventured. Carver worked with ships. Perhaps its sits related to navigation, ports, routes, or a specific vessel like the Erindor. Holmes nodded, his gaze never leaving the canvas. A shrewd guess, Watson. The errandor is indeed implicated, given the ledger and the map we found. This canvas may point to a specific cargo or rendezvous, but we need more context to crack the cipher. He turned to Lestrade, his tone sharp. Inspector, I trust you'll allow me to borrow this canvas for further study. It is, I assure you, far from nonsense. Lestrade hesitated, clearly torn between his skepticism and Holmes's reputation. Fine, he grumbled at last, but don't go ruining it. And don't expect me to chase your wild theories about codes and conspiracies. Holmes folded the canvas with care, tucking it under his arm. Your faith in my methods is, as ever, inspiring. Lestrade. Come, Watson. We have work to do. As we left Scotland Yard, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping London in a veil of secrecy. Holmes's stride was brisk, his mind clearly alight with the challenge of the canvas. "Oh, we shall return to Baker Street," he said, "and examine this under better light. But first, we must gather more data. The apprentices, Daniel and Peter, must be questioned. They were closest to Carver, and Captain Hargrove cannot be ignored. The docks await us, Watson, and with them, the truth." I felt a thrill of anticipation, tempered by unease. The canvas with its cryptic stitches was no mere clue. It was a message from a dead man, a puzzle that held the key to his murder. As we hailed a cab, I glanced at Holmes, his profile sharp against the dim glow of the street lamps. He was in his element, a hunter on the scent, and I knew that no fog, no matter how dense, could obscure the path to his deductions. Chapter 5. Shadows among the apprentices. The fog had begun to lift slightly as Sherlock Holmes and I made our way back from Scotland Yard, the enigmatic canvas safely tucked under Holmes's arm like a prized relic from some ancient tomb. Our cab rattled along the cobbled streets toward the modest lodgings where Thomas Carver's apprentices Daniel and Peter resided, a narrow tenement building in the heart of Wapping, where the cries of gulls mingled with the distant clamour of dock workers. Holmes was unusually animated, his sharp eyes reflecting the lantern light as he unfolded the canvas once more in the dim confines of the cab. "See here, Watson," he said, pointing to a cluster of stitches. "The pattern isn't merely decorative, it's systematic. The red thread forms loops that resemble nautical knots, bowlines perhaps, or clove hitches, but altered. If I am correct, this is a substitution cipher, where each knot represents a letter or numeral. Carver was encoding a message, likely coordinates or a name. I peered at the fabric, the stitches blurring in the swaying light. But to what end? If he feared for his life, why not alert the authorities directly? Holmes folded the canvas with a crisp snap. "Fear, Watson, can make even the boldest man cautious. Carver suspected betrayal close at hand, perhaps from those he trusted most. The apprentices will shed light on this, willingly or not." We arrived at the tenement as dusk settled, the building's facade weathered by years of river mist. A young woman, perhaps the landlady, directed us to a cramped room on the second floor, where Daniel and Peter shared quarters. The door creaked open to reveal a sparse space, 2 narrow beds, a rickety table littered with breadcrumbs, and a single window overlooking the Thames. Daniel, the younger apprentice, a lanky boy with tousled hair and wide, frightened eyes, sat hunched on his bed, while Peter, older and more solidly built, with a shadowed jaw and piercing gaze, leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," Daniel stammered, rising awkwardly. "Mrs. Carver said you'd come," terrible thing. What happened to the master? I found him this morning, blood everywhere, like a slaughterhouse. Holmes' gaze swept the room, noting every detail: a worn jacket slung over a chair, a half-eaten apple on the table, a faint stain on Peter's cuff that might have been ink or blood. "Indeed," Holmes replied, his tone measured. "Tell me, Daniel, precisely how you discovered the body." The boy swallowed hard, his hands twisting in his lap. "I arrived early, as always, around dawn. The door was unlocked, which was odd. Master Carver always bolted it at night. Inside, everything was a mess. Tools scattered, the chair overturned, and there he was, slumped over the bench, knife in his chest. I didn't touch nothing, sir, just ran for the constable." Peter shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Daniel's right. We both left the workshop together last evening, around 6. Master said he had work to finish alone. We came straight here, had supper, and turned in." Holmes' lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "And yet, Peter, your cuff bears a fresh stain, tar, perhaps, mixed with something darker. You claim to have been here all night, but tar is common at the docks, not in this room." Peter's face hardened, a flicker of unease crossing his features. "I handle sales all day, Mr. Holmes. Stains are part of the trade. Doesn't mean I killed him." "Quite," Holmes said mildly. "But let us discuss the canvas, the one with the red stitches. You both saw it, I presume?" Daniel nodded eagerly. "Aye, sir. Master was working on it the last few days. Secretive-like, said it was a special order, but he wouldn't let us near it. Peter tried to peek once, but Master snapped at him." Peter shot Daniel a sharp look. "It was nothing. I was curious. That's all. The stitches weren't for any sale. I'd seen fancy work like embroidery. Master wasn't himself lately, muttering about Tets and that captain." "Captain Hargrove," Holmes interjected smoothly. "You know him?" Peter shrugged. "Seen him around. He and Master argued last week, something about delayed payments or extra work. Hargrove's a rough sort, captain of the Erindor. Word at the docks is he's into smuggling, spices, silks, maybe worse." Daniel's eyes widened. "Smuggling? Master wouldn't? Wouldn't he?" Peter cut in, his voice edged with bitterness. "We all have secrets. Master paid us fair, but he was tight with coin lately. Maybe he got mixed up in something bad." Holmes paced the small room, his shadow dancing on the walls. "And your own secrets, gentlemen. Daniel, you idolized Carver, yet your hands tremble, guilt or fear. Peter, your boots bear fresh mud from the riverbank, not the dry streets. A late-night stroll, perhaps." Daniel flushed, his voice rising. "I didn't kill him. I owed him everything. He took me in when I had nothing. If anyone had motive, it's Peter. He and Master quarreled yesterday about wages." Peter's fists clenched. "All lies. The boy sits spinning tales to save his skin. I argued. Sure, but not enough to kill. Ask around the docks. I've no blood on my hands." Holmes halted, his eyes boring into Peter's. "Not visibly, perhaps, but shadows linger among apprentices, do they not? Loyalty can mask ambition, and ambition can breed betrayal." The room fell silent, tension thick as the fog outside. I cleared my throat, attempting to ease the strain. "Gentlemen, if you know anything about the canvas or Hargrove, speak now. Mr. Holmes will uncover the truth, one way or another." Daniel hesitated, then whispered, "The canvas. I think Master hid something in it. He said once, threads tell tales. Maybe it's a map or a warning. Peter snorted. Fairy stories. But if you're looking for clues, check the Erindor. Hargrove's ship sails at dawn. Rumour is he's skipping town. Holmes's expression sharpened. Valuable information, Peter. Watson, we must hasten to the docks. The shadows here are deep, but the river may reveal more. As we departed, leaving the apprentices in uneasy silence, I glanced back. Daniel looked relieved, Peter defiant. Holmes, striding ahead, murmured, "One lies, Watson, what which? The canvas will guide us, and the truth will emerge from the knots of deception." The night air was crisp, the Thames whispering secrets as we headed toward the docks, the weight of suspicion trailing us like a ghost. Chapter 6. Whispers at the Thames Docks. The moon cast a silvery sheen over the Thames as Sherlock Holmes and I descended upon the bustling docks of Shadwell, the air alive with the creak of rigging and the low murmur of waves lapping against weathered pilings. The fog had thinned to wisps, revealing a labyrinth of warehouses, cranes, and ships moored like sleeping giants. Lanterns bobbed along the wharves, illuminating clusters of dock workers, unloading crates under the watchful eyes of foremen. The scent of salt, fish, and tar hung heavy, a testament to London's lifeblood, the river that carried fortunes and secrets alike. Holmes' stride was purposeful, his keen eyes scanning the shadows as we approached the pier marked on the crumpled map from Carver's workshop. "The Erindor," he murmured, pointing to a sleek brigantine tied at the end of the dock, its sails furled and hull gleaming faintly in the moonlight. A vessel of modest size, yet her lines suggest speed, ideal for discreet voyages. Hargrove's ship, and if Peter's words hold truth, she sails at dawn. We must act swiftly, Watson. I nodded, my hand instinctively brushing the revolver in my coat pocket. The docks at night were no place for the unwary. Whispers of cutthroats and smugglers echoed in every alley. As we drew nearer, the sounds of labour faded, replaced by hushed voices from behind a stack of barrels near the Erindor's gangplank. Holmes held up a hand, signalling silence, and we crept closer, concealing ourselves in the gloom. Two figures huddled there, a burly man with a sailor's tattooed arms, and a slighter one cloaked in shadow. Their words drifted to us on the night breeze, fragmented but laden with intrigue. "Carver's gone, but the canvas, did he finish it?" The burly one growled, his voice rough as gravel. The other shifted uneasily. "He did, but the police have it now. Hargrove's furious, says if that code gets out, the whole operation's sunk. We need to get it back, before what?" Holmes pokes around. "I heard he's on the case. That meddler could unravel everything." Holmes' lips tightened into a thin line, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. I felt a chill. These men knew of us, and their talk confirmed the canvas's importance. The burly man continued, "Hargrove wants us to search the workshop again tonight. If the ledger's there or any scraps." A sharp whistle from the ship interrupted them, and the figures dispersed, melting into the shadows. Holmes straightened, his mind already dissecting their words. "Smugglers, Watson, or I'm a fool. The canvas holds a code tied to their operation. Hargrove is at the heart of it, and Carver's death was no mere quarrel." We advanced toward the Erindor, the deck alive with a few crewmen coiling ropes and securing hatches. A tall, broad-shouldered man, with a weathered face and a captain's peaked cap, emerged from the cabin, his eyes scanning the dock with predatory intensity. Captain Hargrove, no doubt, his bearing screamed authority, tempered by a hint of paranoia. Holmes approached boldly, his voice carrying over the water's lap. Captain Hargrove. A word, if you please, Sherlock Holmes. At your service. Hargrove's gaze narrowed, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a belted knife. Holmes, the detective? What brings you to my ship at this hour? I've no time for idle chat. We sail with the tide. Idle? Hardly, Holmes replied, his tone laced with irony. Thomas Carver, your sailmaker, lies dead, and whispers suggest your involvement. Care to explain your recent arguments with him? Hargrove barked a laugh, though his eyes betrayed unease. Arguments? Business. Nothing more. Carver was slow with my sales, claimed materials were dear. I pressed him, sure. But murder? Preposterous. I've enemies aplenty, but not among craftsmen. I stepped forward, my voice steady. Yet your name appears in his ledger with notes of demands and no further, and the canvas he left, stitched with a code. What secrets did Carver know, Captain? Hargrove's face darkened, his fists clenching. Canvas? I know nothing of that. Carver was a fool, meddling where he shouldn't. If he crossed someone, it's not my concern. Now off my dock before I have you thrown off. Holmes' smile was cold. Meddling, you say? In smuggling, perhaps? Your ship carries more than legitimate cargo, I wager. Spices, silks, or opium. The captain's crew paused in their work, hands inching toward tools that could double as weapons. Hargrove leaned in, his breath hot with rum. Accusations without proof, Holmes. Dangerous game. Carver learned that the hard way. Before Holmes could retort, a shout echoed from the shadows, a dockworker stumbling upon us. Oi! What's this? Captain? Trouble? Hargrove waved him off, but the moment was broken. Be gone, he snarled, and stay out of my affairs, or you'll join Carver in the river. We retreated, the weight of his threat hanging like the fog. As we slipped into an alley, Holmes murmured, "He knows more than he admits, Watson. The whispers confirm it. The canvas is a code to their smuggling routes or contacts." But Hargrove didn't kill Carver. His surprise at the canvas's seizure was genuine. Someone else pulls the strings. We paused near a tavern, spilling light and laughter onto the cobbles. Inside, rough voices rose in song, but Holmes' attention fixed on a figure lurking by the door, a young man with familiar features.
"Daniel,"
he said softly. "The apprentice. What brings him here so far from his lodgings?" Daniel glanced around nervously before entering the tavern. Holmes followed, pulling me along. "The plot thickens, Watson." Whispers at the docks, and now a shadow from the workshop. Let us see what tales this night yields. Inside the smoky tavern, amid tankards and dice games, Daniel sat alone, nursing a ale. Holmes approached, his presence startling the boy. "Mr. Holmes, I came to ask around about Master Carver. Folks here knew him." "Indeed," Holmes said, seating himself uninvited. "And what whispers have you heard?" Daniel hesitated, his eyes darting. "Nothing solid, sir. Just talk of Hargrove's ship carrying specials cargo. And Peter, he was here earlier, arguing with a sailor. Said something about settling the debt." Holmes leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Debt? To whom?" Before Daniel could answer, a commotion erupted at the bar, a brawl spilling toward us. In the chaos, Daniel slipped away, vanishing into the night. Holmes sighed, rising, elusive as the fog. "But we've gleaned much debts, smuggling and divisions among the apprentices. The Thames whispers secrets, Watson, and tomorrow we decode the canvas fully. The net tightens." As we left the docks, The river's murmur seemed to echo our resolve, the mystery unfolding like a sail in the wind. Chapter 7. The Elusive Ship's Captain. The first hints of dawn pierced the lingering fog as Sherlock Holmes and I retreated from the raucous tavern at the docks, the echoes of the brawl fading behind us. Daniel's sudden disappearance had left us with more questions than answers, but Holmes's mind was already forging ahead, his sharp features set in determination. "The boy is frightened, Watson," he said, his voice cutting through the chill air. "He knows more than he admits, and his presence here ties him to Hargrove's web. We must confront the captain again before the Erendor slips her moorings." We hastened back to the pier where the ship lay, her crew now bustling with increased urgency, loading the last crates under the dim glow of lanterns. The Thames stirred restlessly, its waters reflecting the paling sky. Captain Hargrove was nowhere in sight, but a grizzled first mate, with a scar twisting across his cheek, barked orders from the deck. Holmes approached the gangplank, his presence commanding attention. "You there?" Holmes called up to the mate. "Where is Captain Hargrove? We have unfinished business." The mate spat over the side, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Captain's below, preparing for sail. No visitors. Shove off, or I'll have the lads escort you." Holmes' lips thinned, but his tone remained even. "Tell him Sherlock Holmes demands a word. It's about Thomas Carver, and the canvas that could sink his ship faster than a storm." The mate hesitated, a flicker of recognition crossing his weathered face. He muttered something to a nearby sailor, who scampered below decks. Moments later, Hargrove emerged, his coat dishevelled and his face flushed with anger, or perhaps fear. He stormed down the gangplank, stopping just short of us, his bulk casting a long shadow. "You again," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "I warned you, Holmes. My ship's affairs are my own. Carver's dead, and that's an end to it." "Not quite," Holmes replied coolly, producing the folded canvas from beneath his coat. He unfurled it just enough to reveal the red stitches, watching Hargrove's reaction keenly. This was Carver's last work, a code stitched in warning. It speaks of smuggling, debts, and betrayal. Your name is woven into this fabric, Captain. Deny it if you will, but the threads do not lie. Hargrove's eyes widened fractionally, his gaze locking onto the canvas. For an instant, his composure cracked, revealing a glint of alarm. "That, a madman's scribbles. Carver owed me for sales, nothing more. If he fancied himself a codemaker, that's his folly." I stepped forward, my patience waning. "Owed you? Or were you extorting him? We've heard whispers of your specials cargoes, opium perhaps, or contraband from the Indies. Carver supplied your sales, but maybe he discovered your secrets and paid the price." Hargrove laughed, a harsh bark that echoed across the water, but there was no mirth in it. Accusations from a meddling detective and his scribbling sidekick. Prove it then. But mind this, the river's deep, and it swallows busybodies as easily as ships. Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind dissecting every nuance of Hargrove's demeanour, the slight tremor in his hand, the way his gaze darted toward the ship. "You protest too much, Captain, but let us speak plainly. Carver's ledger shows irregular payments from you, far more than sales warrant. And the apprentices mention your arguments. Peter, in particular, seems familiar with your operations. Was Carver your accomplice, or your victim?" The captain's face reddened, his fists clenching at his sides. "Peter? That sly dog. He's been sniffing around, asking for work on my crew. Carver forbade it, said the lad was too green. But if you're fishing for motives, look to the apprentices. Daniel's a weakling, but Peter's got ambition and a temper. Before Holmes could press further, a shout rang out from the ship. Captain Tide's turning customs man approaching. Hargrove glanced back, his expression hardening. "Time's up, gentlemen. Stay off my deck, or next time you'll taste the Thames." He turned abruptly, striding up the gangplank with the crew casting wary glances our way. Holmes watched him go, his expression thoughtful. "Elusive indeed, Watson. Hargrove is guilty of smuggling, that much is clear. His reaction to the canvas confirms it. But murder? His surprise at seeing it suggests he didn't expect it to survive. The killer may have overlooked its significance, or perhaps Hargrove is but a pawn in a larger game." We withdrew to the edge of the dock, the Erindor beginning to loosen her lines. As the ship eased away from the pier, a figure caught my eye, a cloaked man slipping aboard at the last moment, his face hidden. "Holmes, look there! Someone boarding late." Holmes' gaze sharpened, too distant to identify, but the build reminiscent of Peter. If so, the apprentice seeks alliance, or confrontation with Hargrove. We must return to Baker Street and decode this canvas fully. The stitches hold the key, and time is against us. The journey back was silent, the city awakening around us with the clatter of carts and the calls of vendors. At 221B, Holmes spread the canvas across the table, his magnifying glass in hand. "Observe the patterns again, Watson. The red threads form groups 3 stitches short, one long, reminiscent of Morse code, but adapted, if I translate it nautically." He scribbled notes furiously, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The first group, AARG. Hargrove undoubtedly. Then coordinates 51.5, N0.1W, near the docks we just left, and the last BETRAYERINSHADOWS, a warning from Carver, betrayer in shadows. I leaned in, excitement building. Shadows among his own, the apprentices, or someone closer? Holmes nodded, rolling up the canvas. "Precisely. The code points to a rendezvous at those coordinates tonight. We shall set a watch, Watson. Hargrove may be elusive, but the betrayer will not evade us long." As the sun climbed higher, casting light on the tangled threads of the case, I felt the net drawing tighter. The captain's evasion had only heightened the suspense, and I braced for the revelations that the shadows would yield. Chapter 8. Decoding the Stitched Secrets. The afternoon sun filtered through the grimy windows of 221B Baker Street, casting elongated shadows across the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes and I had ensconced ourselves after our tense encounter at the docks. The enigmatic canvas lay spread out on the table like a battlefield map, its red stitches gleaming under the light of Holmes's magnifying glass. Mrs. Hudson had brought up tea, which now sat cooling untouched, as Holmes pored over the fabric with the intensity of a scholar deciphering an ancient scroll. I, Dr. John Watson, paced the room, my mind replaying Hargrove's threats and the cryptic warning embedded in the stitches, "Betrayer in shadows." Holmes finally straightened, his eyes alight with triumph. "It is clear now, Watson," he declared, his voice resonant with certainty. "Carver's code is a masterful blend of nautical semaphore and simple substitution cipher, adapted to the medium of thread. Each stitch length corresponds to a dash or dot, much like Morse, but the angles mimic flag positions, brilliant for a sailmaker." I leaned over the table, eager to follow his reasoning. "You've cracked it fully, then, beyond the fragments we glimpsed earlier?" "Indeed," Holmes replied, pointing to the first cluster of stitches. Here, the short vertical threads spell Hargrave in modified Morse, confirming our suspicions. The next section with diagonal slants forms coordinates 51 degrees 30 minutes north, 0 degrees 7 minutes west, precisely the Shadwell Basin where the Erin-Dor was docked. But the true revelation lies in the final group. His finger traced the doubled back stitch. Betrayer among us, Peter sells secrets. Carver knew of Peter's duplicity. I drew in a sharp breath. Peter? The older apprentice? So he was in league with Hargrave, perhaps leaking information about Carver's work or aiding the smuggling. Holmes nodded, rolling up his sleeves as he continued. More than that, the stitches include a subtle reference to a hidden compartment, likely in the sails Carver made for the Erin-Dor. Smugglers often conceal contraband in rigging or canvas folds. Carver discovered Peter's involvement and encoded this warning, anticipating foul play. The implications swirled in my mind, like the fog outside. But if Peter is the betrayer, is he also the murderer? His muddy boots, the stain on his cuff, they fit. Possibly, Holmes said, his tone cautious, yet Hargrave's reaction suggests he expected the canvas destroyed. Peter may have killed Carver to silence him, but overlooked the code's significance, or perhaps Daniel is complicit. His nervousness at the tavern hints at hidden knowledge. A knock at the door interrupted us. Mrs. Hudson entered, bearing a telegram. For you, Mr. Holmes, from Inspector Lestrade. Holmes snatched it, scanning the message swiftly. Developments at the yard. Apprentice Peter missing. Daniel claims he fled last night. Workshop searched again. Safe forced open, contents gone. The plot accelerates, Watson. The safe likely held evidence of the smuggling, ledgers perhaps, or samples of contraband. I grabbed my coat. Then we must find Peter before he vanishes entirely. The docks, or Hargrave's ship, has already sailed. Holmes pocketed the canvas. His movements brisk. The Erin-Dor departed at dawn, but Peter may have boarded, as we suspected. If not, he'll seek refuge among the smugglers' haunts. We shall visit Mrs. Carver first. She may know of Peter's bolt holes. We descended to the street, hailing a hansom that clattered through the bustling thoroughfares toward Wapping. The widow received us in her modest parlour, her face etched with fresh worry. Mr. Holmes, thank heavens, the police were here, Peter's gone, and Daniel's beside himself. He swears Peter argued with Thomas the night before the murder, something about sharing the profits. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Profits from what, Mrs. Carver? Did your husband ever mention hidden dealings? She hesitated, twisting her apron. Thomas, he confided once that he'd found irregularities in the sales for Hargrave, extra pockets sewn in for hiding goods. He confronted Peter, suspecting the lad added them on orders. Thomas planned to expose it, but feared for our safety. Hence the encoded canvas, Holmes murmured. A safeguard, and a safe in the workshop. What did it contain? His private papers, contracts, a bit of savings, and a letter he said was insurance. I never saw it, but he mentioned it was from a customs official, warning of Hargrave's activities. I exchanged a glance with Holmes, stolen now, no doubt, by Peter, or an accomplice. The betrayer strikes again. Holmes rose, his mind already charting the next move. Mrs. Carver, remain vigilant. Watson and I shall pursue Peter. The shadows are lifting, and the stitches have revealed their secrets. As we left, the sun dipped lower, lengthening the shadows that seemed to mirror the case's deceptions. Holmes hailed another cab. directing it toward the docks once more. The coordinates in the code point to a rendezvous tonight at Shadwell. If Peter is the betrayer, he'll be there, perhaps to meet Hargrove's contacts or retrieve hidden cargo. The cab rattled on, and I felt the thrill of the chase quicken my pulse. The decoded stitches had unraveled a thread of treachery, but the full tapestry of murder and smuggling remained to be woven. With Holmes at the helm, I knew the secrets would not stay stitched forever. Chapter 9. A perilous pursuit in the alleys. The twilight deepened as Sherlock Holmes and I descended upon the labyrinthine alleys of Shadwell, the Thames a restless murmur in the distance. The coordinates decoded from Carver's canvas, 51 degrees 30 minutes north, 0 degrees 7 minutes west, pointed to a secluded wharf in the heart of the docks, a place notorious for its shadowed corners and whispered dealings. Holmes's eyes gleamed with the intensity of a hawk, the folded canvas tucked securely in his coat as we navigated the narrow, cobbled passages. The air was thick with the stench of fish and tar, and the occasional flicker of a lantern cast eerie shapes against the damp walls. "Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice low. "We approach the rendezvous. Peter, if he is our betrayer, will be here, either to meet Hargrove's 6 confederates or to secure his escape. Stay vigilant. The docks at night harbour more than smugglers." I nodded, my hand resting on the revolver in my pocket, the weight of it a small comfort against the unseen threats lurking in the fog. The decoded message, "Betrayer among us, Peter sells secrets," echoed in my mind, each word tightening the knot of suspicion around the older apprentice. Yet doubts lingered. Daniel's nervous flight from the tavern and Hargrove's evasions suggested a conspiracy with many threads, and I feared we were only grasping at the frayed ends. We reached the wharf, a desolate stretch of splintered planks flanked by abandoned warehouses. The Arindor was long gone, her departure confirmed by dockhands, but a smaller vessel, a weathered sloop, bobbed gently at the pier, its single lantern swaying like a beacon. Holmes crouched behind a stack of crates, motioning me to follow. "Observe, Watson," he whispered, pointing to a figure emerging from the shadows near the sloop. "The build, the gait, Peter, unless my eyes deceive me." The figure, cloaked and hooded, moved with cautious haste, clutching a small bundle under one arm. He glanced around, his face briefly catching the lantern's glow, Peter's sharp features unmistakable despite the gloom. He approached the sloop, where a second figure, lean and wiry, waited on deck. Their voices carried faintly over the water, tense and hurried. "You start her late," the wiry man hissed. "Did you get it?" Peter Sitt's reply was sharp. "The safe was empty. Someone got there first. But I Sept got this." He held up the bundle, unwrapping it to reveal a folded piece of canvas, its edges frayed but marked with familiar red stitches. "Carver Sitt's last work. It Sept's what they sits after." Holmes Sitt's breath caught, a rare sign of surprise. "Another canvas," he murmured. "Carver made a duplicate, or Peter stole a second piece. The game deepens." Before I could respond, a third figure emerged from the alley behind us, a burly sailor, one of Hargrove Sitt's crew, his knife glinting in the moonlight. He lunged toward Peter, shouting, "Traitor! You thought you said sell us out." Chaos erupted. Peter bolted, clutching the canvas. As the sailor gave chase, the wiry man on the sloop vanished below deck, and the vessel began to ease away from the pier. Holmes sprang to his feet, his voice urgent. "Watson, after Peter, we cannot lose that canvas." I sprinted into the alleys, Holmes at my side, our boots pounding the slick cobbles. Peter was fast, weaving through the maze with the desperation of a hunted animal, the sailor close behind. The chase led us deeper into Shadwell's underbelly, where gaslights gave way to darkness, and the air grew thick with menace. I glimpsed Peter duck into a narrow passage, the canvas still clutched tight, but the sailor was gaining, his blade a flashing threat. "Holmes," I panted, my lungs burning. "He said'll kill him before we get answers." "Precisely why we must intervene," Holmes replied, his voice steady despite our pace. He darted left, cutting through a side alley to intercept Peter. I followed, my heart pounding, as we emerged just as Peter stumbled, tripping over a loose cobble. The sailor loomed over him, knife raised, but Holmes was faster, seizing a discarded plank and striking the man's wrist with a crack. The knife clattered to the ground, and the sailor roared, turning on us. I drew my revolver, leveling it at him. "Stand down, or I shoot." The sailor froze, his eyes wild with rage, then backed away, vanishing into the shadows with a muttered curse. Peter scrambled to his feet, the canvas still in his grasp, his face pale and sweat-streaked. "Mr. Holmes, I didn't kill him." Holmes seized Peter's six arm, his grip iron. Explanations later. "Boy, that canvas. Hand it over." Peter hesitated, then thrust the bundle into Holmes's hands, his voice trembling. "It's not what you think. Master carver, he made 2 canvases. This one's incomplete, but it has the same stitches. He told me to hide it, if anything happened to him. I was going to sell it to Hargrove's men, to get out of London." Holmes unfolded the canvas, his eyes scanning the red stitches, identical to the first, but with fewer symbols. A decoy, perhaps, or a partial message. Why sell it, Peter? To whom? Peter's 6th gaze dropped, shame mingling with fear. "Hargrove, 6th slot. They promised me a cut if I helped with the sales, special compartments for smuggling. I didn't no, they 6th kill him. When I found out, I took this to bargain for my life." I glared at him, anger rising. "You betrayed Carver, your own master. Did you wield the knife?" "No," Peter cried, his voice breaking. "I argued with him, but I didn't kill him. Someone else got to the safe first. Maybe Daniel, maybe one of Hargrove Sipt's men. I swear it." Holmes's expression was unreadable, his mind already sifting truth from lies. "You still come with us, Peter. The police will want your story. But first this canvas joins its twin at Baker Street. Watson, keep your revolver ready. The alleys are alive with threats tonight." As we escorted Peter back through the maze, the sloop long vanished into the river's embrace. I felt the weight of the second canvas like a stone in my chest. The pursuit had yielded answers, but each revelation wove a tighter net of deception. Who had emptied the safe? Was Daniel complicit, or was Hargrove's crew closing ranks? Holmes' silence told me he was already unraveling the threads, and I braced for the dangers that lay ahead in the shadows of the Thames. Chapter 10. Revelations over brandy. At Baker Street. The gaslights of Baker Street glowed faintly through the lingering fog as Sherlock Holmes, Peter, and I reached the familiar door of 221B. The young apprentice, pale and shaken from our perilous chase through the Shadwell alleys, clutched the second canvas as if it were both shield and burden. My own heart still raced from the encounter with Hargrove's sailor, the glint of his knife, a vivid memory. Holmes, however, was as composed as ever, his sharp eyes flickering with the quiet triumph of a man who had seized a vital piece of the puzzle. Inside our sitting room, the fire crackled, casting a warm glow over the cluttered chaos of books, papers, and chemical apparatus. Holmes directed Peter to a chair, his manner commanding yet not unkind. "Sit, lad," he said, his voice low. "You've much to explain, and lies will not serve you now." He placed both canvases, the one from Scotland Yard and the one Peter had carried, side by side on the table, their red stitches stark against the coarse sailcloth. I poured 3 glasses of brandy, handing one to Peter, whose trembling hands nearly spilled it. "Drink, boy," I said, my tone softer than I felt. It said, "Steady you, but speak plainly. Your master said's blood demands it." Holmes settled into his armchair, his fingers steepled. "Begin with your dealings with Hargrove," he said. "Every detail, Peter. The canvas, the smuggling, the sea profits sicker you spoke of with Carver." Peter took a shaky sip, his eyes darting between us. "It started months ago," he began, his voice hoarse. "Hargrove came to the workshop often, ordering sails for the Erindor. Master Carver was the best, see. His sails were tight, durable. But Hargrove wanted extras, hidden pockets sewn into the canvas, big enough for small parcels, opium, jewels. I didn't ask. Master agreed at first, said the money was good. I helped stitch some, under his orders." Holmes's gaze was unyielding. "And when did Carversted's conscience stir?" Peter swallowed hard. "A month back he got a letter, anonymous, from a customs man, I think. It warned him Hargrove's cargoes were being watched. Master got scared, said he'd not be part of it no more. He argued with Hargrove, told him no more special sails. Hargrove threatened him, said he'd ruin us, or worse." I leaned forward, my indignation rising. "And you, Peter? You betrayed your master for a cut of the profits?" Peter's face crumpled, shame etching his features. "I didn't mean to. Hargrove offered me coin to keep stitching the pockets, even after master refused. I was greedy, thought I could play both sides, but I swear I didn't kill him. That night we argued about wages, like I told Daniel, but I left him alive. Next morning, Daniel found him dead." Holmes picked up the second canvas, his fingers tracing the stitches. "This canvas, why did you take it? And why sell it to Hargrove Sept's men?" Peter's voice dropped to a whisper. "Master made 2 canvases, both with those queer stitches. He said one was a decoy, to throw off anyone snooping. The other, he told me to hide it if he didn't come home. After he died, I panicked. I thought Hargrove's men would pay for it. Let me escape London. I didn't know what the stitches meant, only that they were important." Holmes unfolded the first canvas, comparing it to the second. "The stitches differ subtly," he murmured. "The original name's Hargrove, and gives coordinates for the Shadwell rendezvous, betrayer in shadows. This one," he paused, his magnifying glass hovering over the fabric. "It's incomplete, but adds a new phrase, false ally. Carver suspected more than one betrayer." I frowned, the words sinking in. False ally? Not just Peter, then. Could it be Daniel, or someone higher up, manipulating Hargrove? Holmes' eyes gleamed. "Precisely, Watson. The web is intricate. Peter's greed makes him a pawn, not the mastermind. The safe's contents, stolen before Peter could reach them, suggest another player. And this false allies, perhaps someone within Carver's trusted circle, or even posing as a friend." A sudden thought struck me. Mrs. Carver mentioned a letter from a customs official, insurance she called it. Could it name this ally? Holmes nodded, rising to pace the room, likely stolen with the safe's contents. But the canvases are our guide. The coordinates point to tonight's rendezvous, and the warning of a false ally suggests treachery still at play. Peter, you'll accompany us to Shadwell tonight. Your presence may draw the betrayer out. Peter blanched, shaking his head. They still kill me, Mr. Holmes. Hargrove Cipher's men, they know I took the canvas. Hargrove Cipher's men, they know I took the canvas. Holmes' smile was cold. Then you best hope we reach them first. Watson, prepare your revolver. We'll need it before the night is through. As we readied ourselves, Holmes spread a map of the Thames docks across the table, marking the coordinates from the canvas. The rendezvous is near an old warehouse, abandoned but ideal for illicit exchanges. We'll observe from a distance, let the players reveal themselves. Peter, you'll stay close. Your fear may be our bait. The brandy had steadied my nerves, but the weight of the case pressed heavier. 2 canvases, a murdered sailmaker, a smuggling ring, and now a false ally lurking in the shadows. As we donned our coats and stepped into the night, the fire's warmth faded, replaced by the chill of anticipation. Holmes's mind was a beacon, guiding us through the fog, but I sensed the revelations at hand would test even his formidable resolve. Chapter 11. The Hidden Ledger's Warning. The night air was sharp with the tang of the Thames as Sherlock Holmes, Peter, and I ventured back to the shadowy docks of Shadwell. The coordinates from Carver's canvas burned into our minds. The younger apprentice, pale and jittery, trailed behind us, his eyes darting at every sound, a creaking plank, a distant shout, the slap of waves against the pilings. Holmes moved with the silent grace of a predator, his long coat blending into the fog that still clung to the river's edge. I kept my revolver close, its weight a grim reminder of the danger awaiting us at the rendezvous point. Holmes had briefed us en route. The coordinates pointed to an abandoned warehouse near the Shadwell Basin, a crumbling relic of London's maritime past, perfect for clandestine meetings. The canvasser's warning, false ally, gnawed at me. Peter's confession had painted him as a greedy opportunist, but the true betrayer, the one who had emptied Carver's safe and perhaps wielded the knife, remained elusive. Was it Daniel, the nervous apprentice? Hargrove, with his smuggling empire? Or someone yet unseen, lurking in the shadows of this tangled web? We reached the warehouse, its sagging timbers and broken windows looming like a decayed fortress. Holmes signaled for silence, leading us to a vantage point behind a rusted crane. From here we could see the warehouse's entrance, a gaping maw half hidden by crates. A faint light flickered inside, and low voices drifted on the breeze. Peter stiffened, clutching the second canvas tighter. "That's them," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Hargrove's men." Holmes' eyes narrowed, his hand resting lightly on Peter Sip's shoulder to steady him. "Patience, lad. We wait for the players to show themselves." Moments later, 2 figures emerged from the warehouse, the wiry man from the sloop we'd seen earlier, now joined by a taller cloaked figure whose face was obscured. They carried a small chest between them, its wood scarred and bound with iron. The wiry man spoke, his voice sharp with urgency. "The ledger's inside as promised, but if Holmes is sniffing around, we need to move fast. The Arendor's waiting off Gravesend." The cloaked figure nodded, his voice muffled but familiar. "Carver Sit's canvas. Nearly ruined us. If Peter Sit's got the second one, we sit finished unless we silence him." I glanced at Holmes, whose expression was grim. "The ledger from the safe," he murmured. "It holds the key to their operation. Names, dates, cargoes, and that voice. I know it, Watson." Before I could press him, a third figure stumbled into view. Daniel, his boyish face pale with terror. He clutched a knife, its blade trembling in his hand. "You," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You killed Master Carver. I heard you plotting at the tavern." The cloaked figure turned, and in the dim light I caught a glimpse of his face, Inspector Lestrade. My jaw dropped, shock rooting me to the spot. Holmes' sixth grip tightened on my arm, his voice, his hiss, the false ally. Lestrade, corrupted by Hargrove, sipped coin. The ledger must name him. Peter gasped, shrinking back. "Lestrade?" He took the first canvas, said it was evidence. Holmes's eyes blazed with cold fury, and ensured its secret stayed buried until we retrieved it. "Stay here, both of you. Watson, your revolver." I nodded, drawing my weapon as Holmes crept forward, silent as a shadow. Lestrade's voice rose, laced with menace. "Daniel, you fool. Carver was a liability, poking into things he shouldn't. Drop that knife, or you shall join him." Daniel hesitated, then lunged, his blade slashing wildly. The wiry man tackled him, pinning him to the ground, as Lestrade drew a pistol. Before he could fire, Holmes sprang from the darkness, his cane cracking against Lestrade's wrist. The pistol clattered to the planks, and Lestrade roared, grappling with Holmes in a blur of motion. I rushed forward, leveling my revolver at the wiry man. "Release the boy," I barked. He froze, then bolted toward the warehouse, leaving Daniel sprawled and gasping. Peter, trembling, emerged from hiding, clutching the canvas like a lifeline. Holmes pinned Lestrade against a crate, his strength belying his lean frame. "Inspector," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "your fall from grace is disappointing, if not unexpected. The ledger, I presume, names you as Hargrove Sipt's mole in the yard." Lestrade's face twisted with defiance, but his shoulders sagged. "You step no proof, Holmes. That ledger stats just numbers, nothing to tie me to anything." Holmes snatched the chest, prying it open to reveal a leather-bound book, its pages crammed with meticulous entries, ship names, dates and coded references to L alongside Hargrove's initials. "This," Holmes said, holding it aloft, "details your payments for turning a blind eye to the Erindor's cargoes. Opium, smuggled under Carver's sails. He discovered your treachery and paid with his life." Daniel, scrambling to his feet, stared at Lestrade in horror. You questioned me, acted like you cared about Master Carver." Lestrade sneered. "Carver was a fool, threatening to expose us. I didn't kill him, Hargrove Sit's man did, but I made sure the safe Sit's contents vanished." Holmes' Sit's smile was cold. "And yet you overlooked the canvases. Carver Sit's ingenuity outwitted you. Watson, bind him. Was Sit'll deliver him to the yard. Ironic, isn't it?" As I secured Lestrade's wrists with a length of rope from the crates, the wiry man reappeared, leading a gang of rough sailors from the warehouse. "Holmes!" I shouted, raising my revolver. The odds were grim, but Holmes' calm was unshaken. "Peter, Daniel, run," he commanded. The apprentices fled, Peter still clutching the canvas. Holmes seized the ledger, tossing it to me. "Protect it, Watson. It sets our proof." The sailors charged, and the night erupted into chaos, the warehouse's shadows swallowing us in a desperate fight for truth and survival. Chapter 12. Setting the Midnight Trap. The chaos at the Shadwell warehouse subsided as quickly as it had erupted, the sailors scattering into the fog at the sound of approaching police whistles. Sherlock Holmes, his coat torn but his resolve unbroken, stood over the bound Inspector Lestrade, whose sullen glare betrayed both defeat and defiance. I, Dr. John Watson, clutched the stolen ledger tightly, its pages a damning record of Lestrade's complicity in Hargrove's smuggling ring. Peter and Daniel had fled as Holmes commanded, the second canvas still in Peter's possession, a fragile thread in the unravelling tapestry of this case. The night was far from over, and Holmes's mind was already weaving the next move. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice steady. "Despite the bruises blooming on his knuckles, we have the ledger, but Hargrove remains at large, and the errand door lies off Gravesend, ready to slip away with dawn. Lestrade's betrayal explains much, but not all. The killer, Hargrove's man as Lestrade claims, must be drawn out. We shall set a trap tonight." I nodded, my pulse still racing from the skirmish. A trap? Using what as bait? The ledger? Holmes's eyes gleamed with that familiar predatory spark. The ledger, yes. But also Peter and the second canvas. Hargrove Sit's men believe it holds the same secrets as the first. We set'll lure them to a controlled rendezvous, where their greed will betray them. Lestrade, slumped against a crate, snorted derisively. "You stark mad, Holmes. Hargrove Sit's crew, one set fall for it. They sit cut your throat and toss you in the Thames." Holmes ignored him, turning to me. "We'll need reinforcements. I fetch Lestrade's colleagues from the yard, honest ones, mind you. I trust Inspector Gregson to rally a few constables. Tell him to meet us at the old customs shed near Wapping Pier by midnight. And bring Peter and Daniel back. They're essential." I hesitated, glancing at Lestrade. What of him? Holmes's smile was cold. "Leave him. The constables will collect him soon enough. His role in this drama is played out." Leaving Lestrade bound, I hastened through the fog-choked alleys to Scotland Yard, the ledger tucked safely inside my coat.
The journey was a blur.
My thoughts tangled with the shock of Lestrade's treachery and the looming danger of our plan. At the yard, Inspector Gregson, a burly man with a grudging respect for Holmes, listened to my breathless account and agreed to muster a small force. "Lestrade? A traitor?" he muttered, shaking his head. "Holmes better be right, Watson, or we're all in the soup." Finding Peter and Daniel proved more challenging. I tracked them to their tenement, where they huddled in their cramped room, Peter clutching the canvas like a talisman. Daniel's eyes were red from crying, his trust shattered by Lestrade's betrayal. "I thought he was helping us," he whispered. Peter, grim-faced, said little, but agreed to return, driven by guilt or fear. By 11 o'clock, we rejoined Holmes at the customs shed, a dilapidated structure overlooking the Thames, its windows boarded and its walls stained with river damp. Gregson and 4 constables arrived shortly after, their lanterns casting eerie beams through the mist. Holmes outlined the plan with brisk precision. Peter would stand at the pier's edge, visibly holding the canvas to draw Hargrove's men. Daniel and I would hide in the shed, ready to signal the constables, who waited in the shadows of a nearby alley. Holmes himself would take position atop a stack of crates, observing and directing. "Peter," Holmes said, fixing the apprentice with a piercing gaze, "your role is dangerous, but your greed brought you here. Play it well, and you may yet redeem yourself." Peter nodded, his jaw tight. "I still do it, Mr. Holmes, for Master Carver." As midnight approached, we took our positions. The Thames lapped softly, a deceptive calm beneath the tension. Peter stood alone, the canvas held high, its red stitches catching the faint moonlight. Holmes, perched like a sentinel, murmured, "The net is set, Watson. Now the fish must bite." Minutes ticked by, each one stretching taut. Then from the river came the creak of oars, a small boat gliding toward the pier. Two figures disembarked, the wiry man from the sloop and another, broader figure, his face shadowed, but his gait unmistakably Hargrove's. My heart pounded as they approached Peter, their voices low but carrying. "You've got the canvas, lad," Hargrove growled. "Hand it over, and maybe you walk away." Peter Sitt's voice trembled, but held firm. "I want guarantees, coin, passage, out of London. This canvas is worth more than you know." The wiry man sneered, drawing a knife. "No games, boy. Give it, or we gut you here." Holmes' signal. A sharp whistle pierced the night. I fired my revolver into the air, and the constables surged from the alley, lanterns blazing. Hargrove cursed, lunging for Peter, but Holmes leapt down, his cane cracking against the captain's arm. The wiry man bolted for the boat, only to be tackled by Gregson's men. Peter dropped to the ground, shielding the canvas as chaos erupted. In the melee, Hargrove drew a pistol, but I was faster, my shot grazing his shoulder. He staggered, dropping the weapon, and the constables swarmed him. Within moments, both men were bound, their curses muffled by the river's relentless murmur. Holmes retrieved the canvas, his expression grimly satisfied. "Well done, Watson. The ledger and canvas will seal their fate. But one question remains: who struck the fatal blow?" As the constable secured the prisoners, I saw Daniel emerge from the shed, his face pale but resolute. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice shaking, "there's something you need to know. It's about the night Master Carver died." Holmes's eyes sharpened, sensing a final thread in the tapestry. The trap had sprung, but the deepest secret still waited in the shadows. Chapter 13. Confrontation beneath the moonlit sails. The Thames gleamed like liquid silver under a waxing moon, its restless surface reflecting the chaos that had just unfolded at the Wapping Pier. The old customs shed stood silent now, its shadows deepened by the flickering lanterns of Inspector Gregson's constables as they secured Captain Hargrove and his wiry accomplice. Peter, still clutching the second canvas, trembled at the edge of the pier, his eyes wide with a mix of relief and dread. I, Dr. John Watson, stood guard with my revolver, the ledger tucked safely inside my coat, its damning entries a testament to the smuggling ring's reach. Sherlock Holmes, ever the orchestrator, surveyed the scene with a hawk-like intensity, his mind already probing the final threads of the mystery. Daniel's voice, quavering but resolute, had cut through the night's tumult. "There's something you need to know." Now, as the constables hauled Hargrove and his man toward a waiting police van, Holmes turned to the young apprentice, his expression unreadable. "Speak, Daniel," he said, his voice low but commanding. "The hour for secrets is past." Daniel swallowed hard, his boyish face pale in the moonlight. "It's about the night Master Carver died, Mr. Holmes. I wasn't Stetsonist before. I saw someone in the workshop after Peter left." Holmes' eyes narrowed, his fingers tightening around his cane. "Go on." Daniel glanced nervously at Peter, who stood frozen, the canvas clutched like a shield. "Peter and Master argued, like I said, about wages, or so I thought. Peter stormed out, and I stayed behind to finish some stitching. Master was upset, muttering about betrayal and the sales. I left around 8, but I forgot my cap and went back near 10. The door was ajar, and I heard voices, Master's and another's, low and angry. I peeked through the crack and saw a woman. I started. The revelation jarring. A woman in the workshop at that hour? Daniel nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. She was cloaked, but I saw her face in the lantern light. It was Mrs. Carver, Eliza. She was pleading with him, something about no more lies and the customs man. Master shouted back, said he'd expose everything, even if it cost him. Then I heard a scuffle, and I ran, scared, sir. I didn't want to believe she'd hurt him. Holmes' expression darkened, a storm gathering in his eyes. Mrs. Carver, he murmured. The false ally, woven into the canvas warning. Watson, we must return to her at once. Daniel, Peter, you sit her with the constables until we resolve this. Peter protested, his voice hoarse. Mrs. Carver? She loved him. She wouldn't stet. Silence, Holmes snapped, his tone brooking no argument. Love can breed desperation as easily as hate. Gregson, keep these two under guard. Watson, come. We left the pier in haste, the police van rumbling away with Hargrove and his accomplice, while Gregson's men escorted the apprentices to the yard. The fog had lifted, leaving the night stark and clear as we hailed a hansom and sped toward Mrs. Carver's modest home in Wapping. Carver, the grieving widow, a murderer. Her tears, her pleas for justice, had they been a performance. The ledger's weight in my coat seemed heavier now, its secrets incomplete without this final confrontation. We reached her house, its windows dark save for a faint glow in the parlour. Holmes knocked sharply, his demeanour taut as a bowstring. Mrs. Carver opened the door, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed, as if she'd been weeping anew. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, she said, her voice trembling. Have you found Thomas's killer? Holmes stepped inside, without invitation, his gaze sweeping the room. Perhaps, Mrs. Carver. But first, a question. Why were you in your husband's workshop the night he died, arguing about lies and a customs man? Her hand flew to her throat, her composure cracking. Nah, I don't know what you mean. I was here, waiting for Thomas. Holmes advanced, his voice cold as the river.
Daniel saw you, madam.
You quarrelled with your husband, pleaded with him. He spoke of exposing a truth. Hargrove sits smuggling, Lestrade sits corruption, and perhaps your own complicity. Did you strike him in desperation to silence him? Mrs. Carver staggered back, collapsing into a chair, her hands covering her face. No, I didn't kill him. Yes, I was there. I couldn't bear his secrecy any longer. Thomas told me about the smuggling, the sales with hidden pockets. He'd written to a customs official, begging for protection, but they demanded he testify. I begged him to stop, to think of us, of me. He was furious, said he'd not live a lie. I left him alive, I swear. I watched her closely, torn between pity and suspicion. Then who? Mrs. Carver. Who else was there? She sobbed, her voice breaking. I heard someone outside as I left, a man, I think in the shadows. I thought it was Peter, but I didn't see his face. Thomas was alive when I ran home. Holmes' eyes bored into her, weighing her words. He produced the ledger, flipping to a page marked with her initials, EC payment to you, Mrs. Carver, alongside Lestrade small sums, disguised as household expenses. Were you coerced or complicit? Her eyes widened in horror. No, those were Thomas Sitt's earnings, not mine. He never told me. Oh God, he was protecting me, hiding his own dealings in my name. Holmes's expression softened, but only slightly. A possibility. But the truth lies in that final moment. Someone entered after you. Someone who knew Carver's intent to expose the ring. He turned to me, his voice low. Watson, the canvases and ledger confirm Hargrove's operation, Lestrade's betrayal, and Peter's greed. But the killer struck after Mrs. Carver's departure, exploiting the chaos. A sudden crash from the back of the house jolted us. Holmes spun, his cane raised, as a figure burst through the kitchen door, a man cloaked and masked, a knife gleaming in his hand. I drew my revolver, but Holmes was faster, lunging forward and disarming him with a deft twist. The mask fell, revealing the wiry man from the sloop, his face contorted with rage. "You," he spat, struggling in Holmes' grip. The canvas was supposed to burn. Carver knew too much, and so do you. Mrs. Carver screamed, and I trained my revolver on the man. "You killed Carver," I demanded. He laughed bitterly, blood trickling from a split lip. "I, on Hargrove Sitt's orders. Carver was going to the customs man. I waited till the wife left, then struck. The canvas. I didn't know it was coded till it was too late." Holmes' grip tightened, his voice like steel. "And the safe? You took the letter to silence the customs man Sitt's warning." The man nodded. "Defeated. Its set's gone now. Burned. You Sepp got nothing but that ledger, and it won stet hold without me." Holmes's smile was cold. "Oh, it will hold. The canvases, your confession, and Lestrade's treachery will see you all to the gallows." As we bound the man, the moonlit sails of distant ships seemed to watch, silent witnesses to the truth unveiled. The confrontation had bared the killer, but a deeper shadow lingered, one Holmes was yet to unravel. Chapter 14. The devastating twist unveiled. The moon hung low over Wapping, its pale light filtering through the curtains of Mrs. Carver's modest parlour, where the air was thick with the aftermath of confession and confrontation. The wiry man, Hargrove's enforcer and Thomas Carver's killer, sat bound in a chair, his defiance reduced to sullen silence under Sherlock Holmes's unyielding gaze.
Doctor?
John Watson stood guard with my revolver, the ledger still secure in my coat, its pages a map of treachery that had ensnared Lestrade, Hargrove, and now this murderer. Mrs. Carver, her face a mask of grief and shock, clutched the arm of her chair, her eyes fixed on the man who had ended her husband's life. Holmes paced the room, his lean frame taut with the energy of a predator closing in on its quarry. "You've admitted to the murder," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. "Carver was killed to silence his intent to expose Hargrove's smuggling ring. The canvas, with its coded warning, was overlooked in your haste. But one thread remains loose. Why did you burn the customs man's letter from the safe, yet leave the ledger?" The killer sneered, his split lip curling. "The letter named names. Mine, Lestrade, Sitt's, others. The ledger Sitt's, just numbers. Coded, thought it Sitt'd be useless without the key. Didn't Sitt know Carver was mad enough to stitch his secrets into sails?" Holmes's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. A plausible tale. Yet the canvas message, false a lie, suggests a deeper betrayal, one beyond your crude blade or Lestrade's corruption. He turned abruptly to Mrs. Carver, his gaze piercing. "Madam, you claimed ignorance of the payments in your name, but your presence in the workshop, your argument with your husband, there's more you've not told us." Mrs. Carver-Sick's hands trembled, her voice a whisper. "I told you everything, Mr. Holmes. I begged Thomas to stop his dealings, to protect us. I didn't know about the smuggling until he confessed that night. I swear I didn't harm him." Holmes's expression was unreadable, his mind sifting through the fragments of truth and deception. He produced the first canvas, its red stitches stark in the lamplight, and laid it beside the second, retrieved from Peter. "These canvases," he said, "are twins, yet not identical. The first name's Hargrove, gives coordinates, and warns of a betrayer. The second, incomplete, adds fouls a lie. Why two, and why entrust one to Peter, a known traitor?" I frowned, the pieces still eluding me. A decoy, perhaps, to confuse the killer. Holmes shook his head, his fingers tracing the stitches. "No, Watson, Carver was meticulous. The second canvas is not a decoy. It's a continuation. Look here." He pointed to a subtle variation in the stitching, a series of loops nearly invisible to the untrained eye. "These form a name, encoded differently. Eliza. Mrs. Carver, your husband named you as the false ally." The room seemed to freeze. Mrs. Carver-Sick's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Me? No. That's impossible. Thomas loved me. He never accused me." Holmes' voice was cold, relentless. "Love does not preclude betrayal. The ledger shows payments to E.C., ostensibly household expenses, but far exceeding a sailmaker's means. You knew of the smuggling, didn't you? You profited, perhaps to secure a better life, and when Thomas resolved to expose it, you feared ruin." Mrs. Carver rose, her face ashen. "You wrong. I took nothing. Those payments, Thomas handled them. He said they were for our future, for a shop of our own. I trusted him." The killer laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Trusted him? He was playing you, woman. He funneled money through you to hide it from Hargrove. When he turned on us, you were as much a liability as he was." I stared at Mrs. Carver, torn between pity and suspicion. "Holmes, are you certain?" Her grief seemed genuine. Holmes' gaze softened, but only slightly. "Grief can mask guilt, Watson. Yet I suspect she is not the murderer, but a pawn in Carver's desperate plan." He turned back to her, his tone gentler. "Mrs. Carver, did your husband ever speak of a confidant, someone outside the workshop, perhaps the customs official?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, a man named Mr. Thorne, from the customs office. Thomas said he was helping, but I never met him. The letter in the safe, it was from Thorne, warning Thomas to flee." Holmes's eyes blazed with sudden clarity. Thorne. The final piece. Watson, the killer burned the letter to protect not just himself, but Thorne, a higher power in this conspiracy. Lestrade was a tool, Hargrove a front. Thorne orchestrated it all, using Carver's sails to smuggle under the customs office's nose. The killer sneer faltered, confirming Holmes' deduction. "You still never get Thorne," he muttered. "He untouchable, friends in high places." Holmes smiled coldly. "No one is untouchable, not when the threads are laid bare." He turned to me, his voice urgent. "Watson, we must find Thorne. The ledger and canvases will expose him, but only if we act before he vanishes. Carver, you'll come with us to the yard. Your testimony may yet clear your name." As we prepared to leave, the killer secured for the constables, I felt the devastating weight of the twist. Mrs. Carver, named by her own husband, was no murderer but a victim of his secrecy, a false ally by circumstance, not intent. Yet Thorn, the shadowy puppet master, loomed larger than ever, his influence a dark tide threatening to engulf us all. The moonlit sails outside seemed to whisper of secrets still hidden, and I braced for the final reckoning. Chapter 15. Resolution and the Final Deduction. The first light of dawn broke over London, painting the Thames in hues of gold and grey, as Sherlock Holmes and I escorted a trembling Mrs. Carver and the bound killer to Scotland Yard. The ledger clutched tightly in my hands, and the two canvases safely in Holmes's possession were the keys to unravelling a conspiracy that had claimed Thomas Carver's life and exposed a web of betrayal stretching from the docks to the heart of the customs office. The revelation of Mr. Thorn as the orchestrator, a shadowy official manipulating Hargrove, Lestrade, and even Carver's unwitting wife, had set the stage for a final confrontation. My heart pounded with anticipation, knowing Holmes was poised to tie the last threads of this intricate tapestry. At Scotland Yard, Inspector Gregson met us with a mix of astonishment and grim resolve, his earlier skepticism replaced by trust in Holmes's deductions. The killer, now identified as Jem Rourke, Hargrove's chief enforcer, sat sullenly in a holding cell. His confession secured, but his defiance unbroken. Lestrade, already detained, avoided our gaze, his career in ruins. Mrs. Carver, her face etched with grief and shame, sat quietly as Holmes laid out the evidence before Gregson. "The ledger," Holmes began, his voice clear and commanding, "details payments to Hargrove, Lestrade, and unwittingly Mrs. Carver, funneled through her husband to mask his own complicity. The canvases encode warnings, Hargrove's smuggling, Peter's greed, and the false allies, Mrs. Carver, implicated by her husband's protective deception. But the true mastermind is Mr. Thorn, a customs official who used his position to shield Hargrove's opium trade, embedded in sales crafted by Carver." Gregson frowned, leafing through the ledger. "Thorn, he sets a senior man, respected. You sets sure of this, Holmes?" Holmes produced the first canvas, pointing to the subtle stitches naming E. Eliza. Carver's code was his insurance, a message to expose Thorn if he fell. The letter Rourke burned named him explicitly, but the ledger's coded entries, cross-referenced with shipment dates, point to Thorn's office. He approved the Erindoors clearances, ignoring contraband for a share of the profits. I interjected, my indignation rising. And when Carver threatened to expose him, Thorn ordered Rourke to kill him, framing it as a robbery gone wrong. Mrs. Carverset's voice broke in. "Thomas never told me. He hid the money to protect me, to keep me from their threats. I thought he was saving for our future." Holmes' gaze softened, but his focus remained razor-sharp. "Your husband was a brave man, madam, undone by trust in those around him. Thorn exploited that trust, as he did Lestrade's greed and Peter's ambition." Gregson dispatched constables to apprehend Thorn, whose office was nearby in the customs house. Holmes, never one to leave loose ends, insisted we accompany them. The customs house loomed over the Thames, its grand facade a stark contrast to the sordid secrets within. We found Thorn, a tall, silver-haired man with a politician's charm, calmly sorting papers as if unaware of the net closing around him. "Mr. Holmes," Thorn said, his smile thin, "to what do I owe this visit?" Holmes tossed the ledger onto his desk, the canvases following. Your game is up, Thorne. Carver Sit Stitches named you, and the ledger confirms your profits from Hargrove Sit smuggling. You ordered his murder to silence him, using Rook as your blade. Thorne Set's composure faltered, his eyes darting to the door. Preposterous. I sit a public servant, not a criminal. You sit no proof. Holmes's voice was ice. The Ledgerstead's codes match your approvals. Locke confessed, and Lestradestead's testimony will seal your fate. You betrayed your office, and Carver paid the price. Thorne lunged for a draw, but Gregson Sit's constables were faster, pinning him as a hidden pistol clattered to the floor. His charm dissolved into a snarl. Carver was a fool, threatening to ruin years of work. The River Sit's wealth is mine by right. As Thorne was led away, Holmes turned to me, his expression weary but satisfied. The tapestry is complete, Watson. A Sailmaker Sit's canvas, stitched with truth, brought down an empire of greed. Back at 221B, as the sun rose fully, I sat with Holmes by the fire, the canvases and ledger now evidence for the courts. Mrs. Carver, cleared of complicity, would mourn her husband, but live free. Peter and Daniel, chastened, faced lesser charges for their roles. Hargrove, Lestrade, Rourke, and Thorne would answer for their crimes, the Thames secrets laid bare. Holmes lit his pipe, his eyes distant. A simple thread, Watson, unravelled a conspiracy. Carver Sit's genius was his undoing, but also his legacy. I nodded, the weight of the case lifting. A fitting end, Holmes, justice, and a warning to those who weave lies. He smiled faintly. The game is never truly over, but for now, we rest. Thus concluded the case of the Sailmaker's canvas clue, a tale of betrayal and brilliance that tested even Sherlock Holmes's formidable intellect. From a blood-stained workshop to the moonlit docks, the threads of truth wove a resolution as satisfying as it was shocking. London's shadows hide many secrets, but none can withstand the light of deduction. What did you make of this thrilling conclusion? Were you stunned by Thorne's treachery, or Mrs. Carver's unwitting role? Share your thoughts, and tell us where you're unraveling this mystery. London's foggy streets, a cozy cafe in Paris, or perhaps a fireside in New York. Drop your location in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more Sherlockian adventures. Don't miss the next case. Hit that button and join the hunt.